What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Pro Football Focus Show here on RotoGrinders. I am Britt Devine, back for the Week 2 edition with Daniel Kelly, the lead fantasy editor over at Pro Football Focus. Daniel, we had some good takes. We talked down Austin Eckler last week, right? We got to keep ourselves in check here, but I think for the majority of Week 1, we ended up well, and I'm looking to repeat that here Week 2.
Yeah, some solid takes. Let's see if we can get those back again.
Yeah, always good to have good takes and always good to not have as many bad takes. So what we're going to do here, we're going to have some fun. We got a lot of screen sharing going on in a second. But the first thing I want to tell you guys about is our Sharp Side promotion we have with Vegas Insiders. Don't forget, sports betting is becoming basically a staple across the country. We've teamed up with them to give you a free way to kind of play along and win some money. It's a $10,000 contest. Pays out weekly prizes, pays out a mid-season prize, pays out a leaderboard on total bets at the end of the year. So if you have Sharpside, start swiping, get everything, pick your favorite stuff, and have some fun at it. And at the end of the year, hopefully you can walk away with a couple of bucks. As far as PFF goes, Daniel, you are immersed in all Pro Football Focus statistics left and right, and you kind of incorporate that into your article here, what we learned for fantasy football in Week 1. So you guys listening on podcasts, we'll try to articulate what's going on screen here. But you write this, and it's basically a look back. And I like to look back at my lineups. I like to look back at what happened Week 1 and see if there's any really big conclusions we can draw to make better DFS lineups in the future. So what were some of the main things we learned in fantasy football Week 1 that we can apply a little bit better to Week 2?
One of the things that I noticed that we talked about before the show and you gave me grief already on is Corey Davis had that awful game in Week 1. No receptions, only 3 targets. He had shadow coverage with Denzel Ward. And Davis had a garbage slate of cornerbacks last year, and it showed. And he started out with a bad one again this year. And when he's facing the tough cornerbacks, I think Davis is going to be susceptible to some bad times. But he's going to have an easier road going forward. And we saw A.J. Brown do some stuff. We saw Adam Humphries get a catch. But I do think Davis is still the receiver you want out of Tennessee, and I'm still buying in just a little on him. A couple more weeks and I might be out, but I'm not out yet.
A.J. Brown, he looked like the wide receiver one. Delaney Walker's in there. Derrick Henry's going to get 50 touches every game, running down the field like a bolt of lightning. Nobody can get in his way here. I'm going to disagree with you on that. I'm anti-Corey Davis personally. Best ball, right? If you're playing the best ball drinking contest, right? Every time we say best ball or season long, you take a drink at home. There's a couple for you right there, but 0 best ball shares. I'm out on Corey Davis. I hope I'm wrong for your sake. I like the A.J. Brown dude. He looked pretty good out there.
He looks good, and if he does it more than once, I'll have to suck it up and admit that I'm wrong, but I'm not there yet.
What else you got for me from Week 1?
Jamison Crowder really interested me. The stat everyone's been going on is the 14 receptions, didn't even crack 100 yards, and that's always going to be an issue. He doesn't have a big yardage ceiling, but that number of receptions in anything that's PPR, which our DFS is, he's going to have monster value in that with all the receptions he's going to get.
Yeah, he plays on Thursday too here, so we'll be able to kind of turn that around pretty quickly, maybe take advantage of it. I know over on Yahoo, he's like minimum. He's a minimum price quarterback. He's $21, so you can guarantee he's going to be in my Yahoo lineup over there on Week 1. Give me one more real strong takeaway from Week 1.
Todd Gurley. I'm not panicking yet. He dominated the carries in with the Rams. I am a little worried about his red zone usage, and if that doesn't spike up, panic button will be hit, but we're not there yet. He's the one getting the backfield touches.
Yeah, I saw the Ben Baldwin. He's always a good follow on Twitter. Posted how Malcolm Brown's this generational talent right at the 1 yard line, just wide open running lanes, just waltzes right into the end zone, and that could easily be Todd Gurley. I like Gurley's prices even further down. He had plenty of snaps. I think Gurley's again in play. I'm not buying into Malcolm Brown's the red zone touchdown running back. I think Gurley gets his fair share of those this year too. So I like those. And again, this is an article you can read every week on Pro Football Focus, along with a million others. But hey, Daniel writes this. I got to give him some street cred. So we're going to talk about this every single week. All right, let's move to Showdown for Thursday. And I was trying to make some lineups for this. I think I'm not really playing Showdown. I'm playing the Thursday through like Monday slates that the sites offer because I like more variety. I like more games. And the problem I was running into Showdown, Daniel, is we know everybody who's going to play. There's no guy who might get 25% of the snaps that catches 4 targets and a touchdown. I can't come up with anything. The one thing I was talking to you pre-show about is maybe the Panthers give a little bit of a break because they're on a short week, or maybe Tampa Bay does some strange things because they're on a little bit of a short week. But outside of picking which one of Ronald Jones, Dare, and Peyton Barber scores a touchdown, I don't even know how you get a lot of variety in your lineups this week. So what have you come up with?
I mean, I agree with you on most of that. If they do give a break, we might see a little more Ian Thomas in place of Greg Olsen, because Greg Olsen is 413 years old. But other than that, the only interesting play I have is Cameron Brate for Tampa Bay. And I'm not even sure how surprising he is anymore, but we've seen when he's paired with Jameis Winston, he averages 10 PPR points a game. And that's just hugely valuable for a guy who doesn't do much any other time. He had 2 touchdowns in week 1 called back to penalty. Even one of those goes in. He's a great play. Using him as your captain in a showdown and pairing him with the more obvious plays might be a contrarian move, but you're right. There's just not a lot of surprise in this game on Thursday night.
I want to know if you are playing. If you like me, if you do play the Thursday all-day slates, I will note the Buccaneers seem a little cheap on DraftKings. I know Mike Evans is 7,000. I think that's a little low after coming off illness, going up against Carolina, who I think can be taken advantage of by a receiver like Thomas. I think he's a little bit too cheap. And Christian McCaffrey, I don't care what Christian McCaffrey costs. When you get a running back who's literally playing, never comes off the field, is the entire team's offense, and is the ability to put up 200 plus total yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns in a game, I'm playing that dude, and I'm paying up for Christian McCaffrey, at least on my cash teams, in every single lineup I can get across the industry. And no reason to really want to fade Christian McCaffrey, right?
Not ever. Our Scott Barrett noted in a piece that if you take his last 10 games, other than week 17 last year where they took him out after 5 snaps or whatever it was, he's averaged like 30 PPR points a game. Nobody's ever done that. We're talking season long here, but if you were redrafting today, he'd be number 1 and well ahead of Saquon Barkley for me. He's so far ahead of the field right now just on usage.
Get your drinks ready, because at 1.1 in my best ball teams, I was taking Christian McCaffrey over Saquon in a lot of those. So he
was my top ranked guy this year too.
Yeah, I definitely have. I'm very overweight on Saquon in those. I won't say it again. You guys are probably getting too drunk. Let's get to let's talk a little bets too, right? We talk sharp side. I want to give the people a couple of locks. I actually I saw this line. I couldn't believe what I saw, Daniel. I went. We have legal sports betting here in New York. I went down the street 10 minutes, popped $200 down on Cardinals plus 13.5 at Baltimore. Am I a donkey? I couldn't believe this. I know Baltimore ran Miami out of the building, but let's be real. I think every team's going to run Miami out of the building, and I think that Arizona offense, sure, it struggled at first. I know it's his first road game, and I know it's Cliff Kingsbury's first road game as a coach in the NFL, but that line seems a little bit too big for me.
I mostly agree with you. I can see it going against you, but it does. It seems like an over buy-in on the Ravens beating up on the Dolphins when everybody's going to do that. So I feel like that line could have been 8.5 and not been insane. At 13.5, I kind of agree. You got to do that bet.
Yeah, I thought like 9, 10. I saw 13. I couldn't believe it. So I literally saw that right from the gym, boom, down to the sports book and placed my money on. The other one I like the Giants. Home fav is the Bills. I mean, the Bills are okay. I saw someone on Twitter is popping $3,000 down for them to win the Super Bowl. I mean, there's better ways to spend $3,000 today. But I like the Giants at home against the Bills. I don't think either team's really all too good. Josh Allen prone to turnovers. I think the Giants at home are more than capable of winning this game.
Yeah, I was noting on Twitter that Josh Allen had a terrible game on Sunday that was bailed out in the last couple drives, and I got so much pushback on that. He was bad. I don't get it. He ran in a touchdown. He had one pass because John Brown bailed him out. But I'm happy to bet against I'm happy to bet against Josh Allen anytime I can.
Yeah. Give me a couple of your favorite things you're looking at to possibly make some money on.
I'm super in on Dallas, even on the road, as the favorites against Washington. Just that offense that Kellen Moore's put in place looks so interesting. And maybe they can't put up the kind of numbers they did in week 1 against the Giants. But, man, I think that team's going to be powerful. They're going to challenge Philadelphia in the East.
Any others? It looks like you like the Rams a little bit at home. I mean, that defense, there's plenty of ways for them to get pressure on Breeze. You got a little bit of outdoor stuff going on for Breeze as well.
Yeah. Maybe I'm buying in too much on the Breeze home road splits, but the Rams defense has been absolutely lights out since their bye last year. And I think that's going to continue. I think that was the problem with Cam Newton last week, was he was facing that defense.
Yeah, if you want any, PFF has the green line. Green line was basically in line. They think I'm going to lose my money on that Ravens bet, but I went against the green. I went against the green line. It worked really good. They were really high on the Patriots last week, and they obviously rolled. So if you have PFF already, right, you can just get a little. There's a lot of stuff factored into the green line and take a look at it. I, however, I'm going anti-green line, my own personal self. All right, let's get into some DFS plays for this week. This is where the money's made, and I wish I would have listened to myself a little bit more because I think I had some pretty good calls. By the time it was all said and done, I screwed my lineups up, and I ended up losing money on week one. I know nobody likes to admit it, but sometimes you got to spend some time reviewing your lineups, reviewing what happened, and seeing what your mistakes are. And I think I've got them figured out for some tournaments on week two. But let's try to help the people out here. A couple of studs. We'll start with Lamar Jackson. If you would have told me Lamar Jackson had 5 touchdowns, I would have been, how many did he score rushing? 3, 4, right? And it was none. But this looks like a really good spot. Arizona's defense is absolutely atrocious. You don't have to sell me on Lamar, but in case anybody was doubting, give it to him.
Yeah, it's the same sort of stuff. Everything he did against Miami, he can do against Arizona, and we know he's going to run. He had, I think it was 6 yards in that game. We're going to see more from him. I think the ownership's going to be high after everybody saw what he did last week. But I think if you want to go for someone near the top, there's no risk there.
Yeah, in the early ownership projections, we have him at about 9%, which is the second highest quarterback. I say maybe it just ticks up a little. He's going to get a lot of hype as the week progresses and the news cycle goes on. And we've got a couple different targets we'll talk about to use him with. So I definitely like Jackson, and I do agree he's going to be pretty highly owned. You've got another one, right? So I've got a bounce back candidate. You've got a bounce back candidate. Let's hash it out. Who's the better one? You got Big Ben.
I do have Big Ben. They looked so bad in week one, but now they're facing a Seattle team that just let Andy Dalton put up a career high in pass yardage, and they have something to prove. And maybe something to prove is a soft factor we shouldn't be taking into consideration. But I can't see Roethlisberger having 2 garbage games in a row, and he's not going to be well owned after that awful game in week one.
Yeah, always does good at home. I'm always worried that Seattle, even when they're down 14, they're still going to try to, run the ball because that's what Seattle does. They can't throw the ball because throwing the ball creates interceptions. And if you lose the turnover battle, you're going to lose the game unless you're that's how Pete Carroll thinks. I really think it is. But I expect Pittsburgh to be able to score. If Andy Dalton can throw 400 yards, Ben Roethlisberger can throw for 500, in my opinion. So exactly. I like that call. Mine. This is a little different. I'm going Kirk Cousins, right? He was really highly owned along with Adam Thielen last week. So the what have you done for me lately crowd, they're going to give him the thumbs down. I like it. I don't think that Packers defense is as great as they showed week 1 against Chicago because, let's face it, Matt Nagy didn't know what he was doing. Mitchell Trubisky didn't know what he was doing. There's like 16 running backs on the field all at the same time for Chicago. I'm not really holding that Packers defense into a high standard till I see him play a real offense. And I think Minnesota is a real offense. So I like Cousins. As long as Diggs is off the injury report, it's going to be really easy to know who to stack him with. So I'm looking for Cousins to be one of my bounce back ownership plays of the week. I think he was currently coming in at about 2%. So that's going to be one of my stronger stands, I think, as the week progresses in tournaments. Let's a couple of value quarterbacks. I think there's a lot out there. You can go to Matt Stafford. Josh Allen's going to be popular, but you've got 2 other guys. First, we've got Derek Carr. He owns the Chiefs in his recent starts, and I mean, dude looked pretty good. You've got some really interesting. I couldn't believe this when you told me this. So let's start off with the biggest stat of the week.
Yeah, he literally had tied for the highest overall PFF grade at quarterbacks, tied with Dak Prescott for week 1. And I mean, he didn't have to do that much for fantasy numbers because Josh Jacobs scored the touchdowns other than the one Tyrell Williams touchdown. But Carr looks really good. He was really accurate. And he's going against this Chiefs defense that just made Gardner Minshew look like a big-time pro. And maybe Gardner Minshew's been wildly underrated coming into his career, but this is still a 6th-round rookie thrust into action in week 1. I think that a lot of the credit there has to go to the Chiefs defense letting him put up those points. Carr gets that defense this week.
Yeah, he's torched him the last couple of meetings. I got the grades pull up here. I couldn't believe this. There's some Gardner Minshew, 6th highest graded quarterback. We'll talk about him in a second. Really high grade as well. But if the Chiefs defense, you're gonna have to pass the ball to keep up with him, and it's really easy to stack with Carr too because that looks like a really concentrated offense with Antonio Brown out of town. So we'll talk about some of his targets a little later. You also want to talk about Andy Dalton. Just threw his first. I can't believe this either. That was his first 400-yard game. I know it's tough to throw for 400 yards, but he looked pretty good. It's the Rams East he's got going on over there.
Basically, yeah, he's got this Rams offense integrated, and yes, a lot of it was Seattle's defense is not great defending the pass, but he threw for 400 yards. He might not have Joe Mixon this week, which means his number one running back, Giovanni Bernard, is going to be more of a pass catcher. John Ross looked amazing for his standards, and if they have any kind of offense with John Ross, Tyler Boyd, and Giovanni Bernard, Andy Dalton could keep this going.
Value play for me. Another one is going to be Jared Goff. I think he's going to end up drawing some ownership. We had him about 8%, which was about the third highest in our early ownership projections. But I really like him to bounce back after an underwhelming week one. He wasn't even really targeting the running backs. That can get in there. I like all of that involvement. And, Woods, Cooks, and Kupp, these guys looked almost unstoppable. Cooks didn't even have his basically the deep ball. Couldn't really connect on that if that lands. Goff's off to the races this week, and I really like him in the Saints game. So I'm really looking at him. All the wide receiver cornerback charts on PFF look pretty good for the receivers as well. So yeah, I'm looking to use Goff a variety of ways. More multi-entry because which one of Woods, Kupp, Cooks is the one that's going to go off? I don't know if you can accurately predict that on a week-to-week basis. So you got to mix up the lineups with him, but he's someone I'm really looking to utilize. You wanna throw some fire. You got a couple of duds, and one might be a little fire take here. It's coming from that Rams Saints game. It's not Goff, it's Drew Brees. So what are you hating on Drew Brees for?
Well, I mentioned this last week in passing, then I did a little more research and even further cemented my opinion on this. Aqib Talib missed 8 games last year for the Rams, and in those 8 games, they allowed opposing quarterbacks to put up 26.8 points a game. In the games Talib played, so weeks 1 through 3, and then after week 12 through week 1 of this year, that number's 13.1. Quarterbacks are doing half as much against them when Talib's on the field. Talib's still on the field. That defense is so much better when he's there. Add in Drew Brees on the road. He's great. He's Drew Brees, but I don't want any part of him this week.
Couple of thoughts on some higher owned guys. Josh Allen's getting some love. We've got a low projection for ownership right now, but Allen's the talk of the town, I think, from some decent people, at least for cash games. Do you have any thoughts on him? I'm taking the Giants to win this game straight up.
Yeah, maybe I'll stay wrong on Josh Allen for a long time, but he's got to do a lot more showing he can throw the ball to me before I'm going to buy in on him.
Yeah, I think he's people think he has this high floor from the rushing, and I agree the rushing gets there, but unless he gets the rushing touchdown, I think you can be in for a world of hurt sometimes. I don't see myself – maybe I'll change my thoughts, but I don't really see myself using Allen as a cash game play. All right, let's go to some running backs here and keep this moving along. And I'll start off first with a couple of my plays, and I'll let the people – kind of wait on a couple of at least your stud take here because I'm a little worried about this one, Daniel. So I'm hoping you can bring the goods. I'm going to start with what's going to be the chalk. We've got Alvin Kamara, right? If you want to make money this week, play Alvin Kamara. He owns the Rams. I was talking to Derek Carty earlier in the blitz projections, and I was like, the BVP for Kamara is really good, right? The baseball guy, the batter versus pitcher. Well, Kamara versus Rams, he absolutely demolishes him. He's got a little bit bigger of a snap share this year than he had last year. And I think in those close competitive games with the should be, I'm expecting him to get, 70 to 75% of the snaps or running back touches compared to maybe 65% he was seeing last year. And when you're as efficient as a guy like Kamara is, that's a huge boost to your fantasy potential. So I really like him. He's the cheapest of the big four between Zeke, Saquon, and CMC if you're playing the big slate. So I love Kamara. I'm probably going to be playing him a lot. And I don't really think you can talk down on Kamara, right?
No, it's a great play. Assuming I'm right at all about the Rams defense on Drew Brees, the Saints aren't going to just be shut down. And that means Kamara is going to have the performance just like McCaffrey did in week 1. I think that's a great play.
All right, let's get to your stud. And this one, it's interesting because I think the ownership's going to be really low. And if it works out, it can really work out for you in tournaments. You got Sony Michel, who in the ultimate Sony Michel game script last week did absolutely nothing. He's going to need to get into the end zone, which I think he can certainly do once, twice, 3, 4 times against Miami, right? So what has you looking at Michel this week? Is it just the 42-7 drubbing that's going to happen?
42-7 might be conservative, but yes, that's a big part of it. I mean, they're going to be having, taking off-field stuff out of the play. Assuming Antonio Brown's on the field, they're going to have him, but only on a few days of working into the offense. They're going to win this game by 30 before you even blink, they're going to be running the ball down their throats. And yes, Rex Burkhead had some work in week 1, but Sony Michel had 15 carries. And if you tell me Sony Michel's going to have 15 carries, that's fine. I'm going to get some production out of him most weeks. This week was an aberration. Tell me he's going to have 15 carries this coming week, and I'll bet 100 yards. I think he's going to be fine.
The other one, I really do like this one, especially from a game theory, contrarian perspective. David Johnson in Baltimore. Again, I like this Arizona offense to be able to score points. They play fast. There's a lot of plays. It's going to be, Damiere Byrd is putting up fantasy relevant performances for the Cardinals because this is just what they're doing. And if they're going to fall behind, if the spread's so big, they're going to be making a play every 22 seconds like they were doing last week in this comeback against the Lions. And when you take a snap that quickly, so much faster than anyone else has really ever done in the NFL, there's just fantasy potential all over the place, even if you are a big underdog.
Yeah. First of all, I did not even realize Damiere Byrd was still in the league until I saw that game.
I picked him up in my
David Johnson.
All over my dynasty.
Absolutely. I had no idea. But yeah, David Johnson, you look back at the way he's been used. In 2016, he was split out wide a lot. His average depth of target was more than 4 yards. He averaged 6 targets a game. Then in 2018, he came back from injury. He had this awful offense, and he was running a lot fewer routes. He only had a few targets a game. His average depth of target was under a yard. Well, then Sunday he comes back, and everything's back the way it was in 2016. This Cliff Kingsbury offense means great things for him. I think he's going to be probably not what he did in 2016 because nobody can do that again, but he's going to be just fine. He's going to be a monster David Johnson season right again.
Yeah, I like it. I'll skip over Giovanni Bernard because is Joe Mixon going to play? I don't really know. Joe Mixon's out. Hey, play Giovanni Bernard. Joe Mixon's in. I don't know if I want to play Joe Mixon. I don't know if the price will be right, but he would be an interesting tournament play. But we like nicknames in DFS. We got Raheem Mostert. I like him coming in behind Breda. He's cheap. And when the dude's on the field, just like whenever Matt Breda's on the field, he gets us fantasy points. Whenever Raheem Mostert, whatever you want to call him, gets on the field, he gets us fantasy points. And I like him quite a bit here in the San Francisco offense.
Yeah, this is Kyle Shanahan's offense loves to use 2 running backs. So, even if Breda didn't have the history of injury, you're going to put him out there. Mostert's going to get plenty of touches. He had 2 games with more than 20 snaps last year, which is a low threshold. But in those 2 games, he had 165 combined yards. That's worthwhile for the price he's going at.
Sorry, my neighbor is revving their Harley Davidson down the street right now. But yeah, Mostert, the only problem with him is he's not the every down. He's not Christian McCaffrey, and I don't play the non-Christian McCaffreys too often. I like a lot of those workhorse running backs, but he is just 3,800 on DraftKings. You could squeeze him in the games, I think, this week. A couple other guys I might like. I like Leonard Fournette. Played 86% of the snaps last week, 6 targets, unquestioned role. Looks like he's going to be out there all the time. I know they're road underdogs, and it's not the best spot, but I think Gardner Minshew looks pretty decent, and I think Fournette is he's locked into these huge amount of snaps and a huge workload regardless of game script, and those are extremely valuable DFS plays at the running position. So I like him quite a bit. The other guy's Austin Eckler. Right, I've come full circle. I used him some last week, not as much as I should have. We were worried, right? Maybe he gets 60% of the snaps, and he didn't get 60. He didn't get 65. He got over 70% of the snaps last week. And if you're going to do that, they just lost Hunter Henry. I saw all kinds of stats floating around on Twitter. When Hunter Henry is out for the Chargers, the running backs get even more targets. It's really hard. If I give you 12 to 15 carries and 6 to 9 targets, I think those are all relatively close to his floors on a week-to-week basis right now. That is unstoppable. That's $8,000 territory on DraftKings pricing, and he's 6,100. I think we got to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I've been a huge Austin Eckler fan since he entered the league. I just didn't think he could hold up to the major workload. And we saw in week 1 that I was wrong with that. He held up. And, Hunter Henry's out, like you said. Mike Williams might be out. We had that come out. They're running out of offensive weapons. Eckler's going to get so much work now.
Yeah, absolutely in love with Eckler. Another guy, chalk du jour of the week, Josh Jacobs. I don't know how, 4,700. I don't know what was going on over at DraftKings. They forgot that Antonio Brown wasn't on the Raiders anymore, and they went from Denver to playing the Chiefs, and they're like, we'll just leave them all cheap, and everyone can have fun. But the Raiders are going to be extremely chalky. Jacobs, a little worried he didn't get a lot of passing game work, but he's 4,700. Who cares if he's going to touch the ball 20 times? I'm okay with that, and I'm looking for him to be probably the highest owned running back on the slate. Do you have any reason? I mean, he looked really good. What do you have? 9 avoided tackles per PFF. That was second only behind Alvin Kamara, who's basically impossible to tackle. So he looked really good to me.
Yeah. Oh, I love Josh Jacobs. I was all on him before the season. You should see the shares I have of him in my season long leagues.
Drink.
I mean, drink. Yeah, you say he didn't have a lot of receiving game involvement in week 1, but they didn't need it. They were ahead from the start. He's still going to play ahead of Jalen Richard. And I mean, the reason his salary didn't go up is because the game was late Monday night. They already had the salary set. I think this is your last chance to get in for anything under than a huge price.
Mm-hmm. And you've got one dud here I want to talk about. It's Kerryon Johnson. A little worrisome. I know Marlon Mack put up a big game against the Chargers last week, but I think we're both concerned about Kerryon's overall workload. They played 4 different running backs for the Lions last week. Just a little concerning. Those are not the type of running backs I like to use on my teams.
Yeah, there's so little way for Kerryon Johnson to give you a big return with C.J. Anderson stealing so many touches. He's going to have to break off a couple huge runs. That is something he can do, but betting on that's just asking for wasting money.
All right. I want to go. Scott's not here with us this year, but hey, you look through all of Scott's stuff. Before it goes up, you read through it, and you got to make sure he's got all those dang stats for us. So we've got his expected fantasy points, the top usage, and this was one of the keys to being a really good fantasy player last year is you avoid the guy, it's hard to explain, avoid the Marquise Brown who had 14 snaps, although maybe we could play Marquise Brown. We'll talk about him in a second. And have more interest in the guys who got 11 targets but didn't really have a big fantasy day. Gets the right fantasy work on different parts of the field. So what are some big takeaways from Scott's article that you noticed before we start talking about wide receivers?
My biggest one is, I watched all these games on Sunday, and I didn't even realize how heavy Keenan Allen's usage was in week 1. But he had 116 air yards. He had 2 targets inside the 10 and 2 deep targets. He was getting usage all over the field. And as we talked about those injuries, his usage is only going to go up. Allen's going to be knocking on the door of the top tier at wide receivers.
Yeah, I agree completely on that. Give me one more guy who really stands out. Let me scroll around. We mentioned David Johnson. Look, we talked Austin Eckler. Let's talk Chris Carson. He's a running back I'm debating using again, even as a road dog. When you get that type of volume, you got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, everyone was talking about what Rashad Penny would cut into his workload, and the answer is not a lot. He played 76% of the snaps. He had all the team's running back opportunities inside the 10-yard line. Everything that the Seahawks needed to do leaned on Carson. And we talked about how much this offense is going to be running the ball. He's going to get most of that workload. I love him every week.
Yeah, here's the whole list for you guys. Take a quick look at it. If you're watching on the YouTubes, study it, pause it, look at it. These are some of the best fantasy targets you could possibly use in actual opportunity. Scott puts a lot of work into this. All the stuff at PFF's great, and this is one of the must-reads I look at every single week. All right, let's move to some wide receivers. We just talked about Keenan Allen. Anything else to add about Keenan Allen? I just think there's might not be Mike Williams. There's no Hunter. Who else are they going to throw the ball to?
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of Travis Benjamin and Dontrell Inman. Yeah, I just don't know how you get away from Keenan Allen right now.
Yeah, I agree completely. I'll let you talk T.Y. Hilton, too. I wasn't expecting a big season out of T.Y. Hilton, but it looks like it's here.
Yeah, everyone got scared off from him with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, which is understandable. But week 1, he looked great. He scored twice. He had, 80-something yards on 8 receptions. And I said it last week. Adoree Jackson is one of the heaviest targeted cornerbacks in the game. He's going to be on T.Y. Hilton. So even if Hilton doesn't get massive quality, he's going to get so much quantity.
Yeah, I like T.Y. Hilton. I'm on if you're spending at wide receiver, I still think Michael Thomas is just so good, and that offense is very concentrated. It's Michael Thomas, it's Alvin Kamara as 1A, 1B, and then it's everybody else is like D or C and D plays. So I still like Michael Thomas. I know he's outdoors, his production drops a little bit, but it's just such a concentrated offense. I still think you can use Michael Thomas. The other guy, I don't care that Sammy Watkins went up $1 bajillion on DraftKings because, one, he was PFF's #1 graded wide receiver last week. And Oakland, Cortland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders putting up big games. They might be down an extra quarterback. They're out Jonathan Abrams. I mean, how does Sammy Watkins looks to be one of the better plays of the week, even at a high price to me?
Yeah, he's going to be massively owned, a high salary, and I don't care. As long as Tyreek Hill is out, Sammy Watkins is a must play in most setups.
What about the new guy on the block, McCole Hardman? Tell the people about him.
He played so many snaps in week one. It went under the radar because he didn't get a lot of targets, didn't have the receptions, but he played more snaps than Travis Kelce. He was right up there near Watkins in the playing time. And now that Hill is out, they drafted him to be the new Tyreek Hill when they thought they might lose him. He's not Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is a unicorn, but Hardman is going to get plenty of run here, and he's not expensive yet. You're going to get some savings and a huge upside.
We're seeing these shifty speed receivers just kind of dominate the league right now. Unless you're Michael Thomas or DeAndre Hopkins or Julio Jones, who are they're just different than everybody else. It's the speed guys really shined week one. I think that's a trend we can sort of extrapolate into working until teams can try to figure out how to stop it. So I think Hardman fits that bill pretty easily, and I'm definitely on board. Priced a little higher than we probably want for a guy who didn't have any stats last week, but I'm definitely on board. We're looking for snaps, and he's going to be out there just about every snap, if you ask me. A couple other guys. So we're looking for some low-owned plays in tournaments. I got a couple for you again. So I like that Arizona game, right? If you're down and you're Cliff Kingsbury and you're Kyler Murray, you're going to be throwing the ball a lot. And it's Christian Kirk and it's Larry Fitz with 10-plus targets. I don't see how these guys don't end up with 10-plus targets most games, especially in this one when they're going to be throwing. I know the Baltimore defense is really good, but if they're going to come in between 3 to 5% owned, I'm getting on board with that. I can get on board with Devontae Parker as a low-owned dart throw. Somebody's got to catch the ball. And if Albert Wilson's out, hey, the air yards. Devontae Parker was one of the air yards kings of last week. And I'll take that as a dart throw. I think Terry McLaurin kind of fits that bill of these speed receivers. He's playing out every snap. He's still cheap. I think you can get on board with him and Trey Quinn too, more of a PPR lower floor, but Quinn's going to catch a couple of touchdowns, and I think Washington's going to be down in that game. So I'm looking at him. And then the one thing we really need to do, let's sort this out right now. Who are we pairing with Lamar Jackson this week? So we took a look at some snaps. You got access to the super duper ultra elite, most expensive. Only Bill Belichick has these type of stats, but you get to look at them because you work for PFF as well. So let's try to break down what happened in this game stat-wise and see if we can extrapolate anything to actually get the right plays with Lamar Jackson this week.
Yeah, well, we can do that. Everyone, we saw what Marquise Brown did in that game with his massive yardage, but he played 14 snaps. As you had me check it out. 10 of those snaps in the first half, 4 in the second half when the game was out of hand. Miles Boykin had the same sort of split. He had 16 snaps in the first half, 2 in the second half. Willie Snead is the one I'm interested in. He had 19 snaps in the first half, and that was shot up to a 30 in the second half. So he's going to be on the field no matter what's going on in this game for them. And he's the only guy they kept around from last year. There had to be a reason for that. They like Willie Snead. He's not going to be this blazing speed guy like Marquise Brown, but he's always going to be involved in the game. And I just think for his super low price point, he's going to be really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think the guy like Boykin he was like the most athletic person ever at the combine in testing, and I think I'm gonna maybe use him a little bit more than the field's gonna use this week with Lamar, because I expect Marquise Brown just a little. He's gonna play more than 14 snaps this week. I have a hunch, and I also think Boykin's gonna play more snaps than he did, especially if the game's competitive. And I think the Ravens aren't really gonna try to let off at all either, because they know this Arizona offense can score at basically any time. So I'm looking for them to play their good players. And I think Brown, let me check his price. I think it got up to 5,000. Yeah, he got up to 5,000, but Boykin flying under the radar at 3,200. You can create some really good Lamar Jackson teams with Boykin, get low ownership, and also get some really good players around him. So I like Boykin kind of, quite a bit. You like Snead. Lamar Jackson's going to throw. These guys look really good. I'm on board with stacking up, but I like Boykin a little bit as a low-owned tournament dart throw.
I think this will be a kind of situation, like you said, with the Rams, where you're going to have a few different lineups and kind of mix and match. Because I don't have a problem with any of them, but I will say that I'm interested in Snead right now.
Patriots wide receiver. What are we doing with the Patriots?
I don't know. There's the extenuating circumstances makes this really complicated. I'm not believing in Philip Dorsett. I think Julian Edelman is the one guy we know how he's going to get used. So if I'm going to use a Patriots receiver right now, it's going to be him.
I think Gordon's the cheapest, I believe, and I mean he's just a man amongst boys out there on the field. When he's a tight end playing wide receiver and extremely athletic. So I think Gordon's the one. Are you worried if it's they pull the Ravens where it's 35-3? I mean, you never really know how these things go. I think also don't forget the Patriots. They got beat by Miami last year. I don't think they're gonna take the foot off the pedal until well into the third quarter here.
Yeah, this is one of those Patriots things, when they love to just beat up on somebody when they're angry, and I feel like they're going to want revenge on that stupid Rob Gronkowski playing safety game last year. So I think they're going to beat up on the Dolphins, and they're not going to pull off until fourth quarter at least. So who knows how it shakes out, because they're going to. I wouldn't be surprised if Gunnar Olszewski has a touchdown in this game, but they're going to be playing as hard as they can.
Yeah, they got Brian Flores over there, but I'm still expecting him to kind of, put it on the old team there. So I like Mr. Belichick to try to run up the score on him quite a bit this week. Anything else really stand out to you, wide receiver? We could talk about a lot of guys. You got a couple duds. The high end guys don't look too sexy this week, right?
That was my issue. Like a lot. Other than Julio Jones against the Eagles, and he's not even on the main slate, the biggest name wide receivers all have some bugaboos. I'm not saying you're going to shy away from these guys completely, but Devontae Adams had his worst game in more than a year in week one, and now is going to draw Xavier Rhodes' shadow. And he did well against Rhodes last year, but Rhodes just held Julio Jones to one target and no receptions in his coverage in week one. So I worry that Devontae Adams is going to have another bad week. DeAndre Hopkins. Yes, the Chiefs passed all over the Jags in week one, but this is still a good Jags pass defense. Unless you're telling me there's some reason to doubt Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Bouye, Hopkins is going to have another bad matchup. So these biggest names worry me a little for week one, for week two, whatever week we're in.
Yeah, week two. Let's go to tight ends and kind of hash out the biggest question of the week. If we're saving money, are we using Darren Waller or are we using T.J. Gronkinson? We love those names. Gronkinson just rolls right off the tongue. He looks really good. These rookie tight ends are always a little iffy, but he looked good. Waller's 3,300 on DraftKings. Hockenson, 30. So he was 3,100. Had the best rookie day ever for a tight end, and he's dropped $100. He's down to $3,000 on DraftKings. So what are we doing? This is a really tough choice people are going to have to make this week.
I don't understand that Hockenson price. I'm right with you. I don't know how that happened. I will say that for me, of the two of those, I'm going Waller. We know the Lions want to be more run heavy, and that the game just set up for them to be pass heavy in this one because of the way the Cardinals' defense is messed up. But I do worry that we're going to see a big running back committee, and the pass catchers in Detroit aren't going to be great. Meanwhile, Waller, as you said earlier, there's only so many offensive weapons with Oakland. They're going to be passing a lot, and Waller and Tyrell Williams are going to be the only ones to benefit from that. So I like Waller between the two.
Waller is the Christian McCaffrey. He literally didn't leave the field. He's the Christian McCaffrey of tight ends. Played every single snap, and I don't really see that changing. Of course, Tyrell Williams. I don't even know if we talked about him at wide receiver. He's the chalk of the week. It's a very this is what makes it so easy to stack with Derek Carr, because it's a very concentrated offense between Tyrell Williams, Darren Waller, and Josh Jacobs. They all get very good targets down the field. Everybody else that gets a snap on the Oakland offense is getting little dinky, 2-yard outs and 3 air yards and just not high-value targets at all. It's a very concentrated, high-octane offense. So I like Waller, I think, a little bit more than Gronkinson as well. I'm in with you on that. If we're spending money, what are we doing at tight end? Because, again, there's some really good options. We've got Travis Kelce. He should have had 4 touchdowns. Kittle should have had a couple of touchdowns. Everybody should have had a bunch of touchdowns at tight end. They just didn't come through with them.
Yeah, I love Kittle. I had him in a lot of lineups, and he had 2 touchdowns called back to a penalty, and it killed me. It made me so sad. But if you just look at his stat line, it's going to be frustrating because he only had 5 points or whatever it was. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like that. But his usage was still right there. He was the only one on the 49ers who had more than 3 targets. He's going to be a monster nonetheless.
Yeah, I like Kittle quite a bit. Ingram, even against Buffalo, if Sterling Shepard doesn't recover from that concussion, 14 target, it's very tough to overlook a tight end getting 14 targets. It just doesn't happen. I don't know if he's going to get 14 targets against the Buffalo Bills, but I think what's his floor? I think something like 8 targets in a game, and even that's almost unheard of at the tight end position. He only went up. He was 4,800, 32 fantasy points. Let's just raise his price $400. So he's just 5,200. I still think that's about $1,000 too cheap for Evan Ingram. I still like him against the Bills on DraftKings quite a bit. A couple other guys. I think Delaney didn't really play a ton of snaps, but they were highly productive snaps for Delaney Walker, running routes on almost all of them. I think you could still look at him against the Colts. Home favorites for tight ends are some of the biggest trends you could look for that, and he certainly fits that bill. A couple guys you want to note could be duds. One's Kyle Rudolph. I think a lot of that could have been due to game script, right? 10 passes from Kirk Cousins. If Kirk Cousins throws 30 passes, I would expect Kyle Rudolph to get a target, but I still don't know if he's going to get kind of what he did last year, especially because they've got Irv Smith out there for a lot of snaps too. He didn't really do much either. In fact, I think he came with a goose egg. I'm just worried he kind of eats into Rudolph a little bit, and I think you are too.
Yeah, Rudolph, he's a bigger name right now than he is a fantasy contributor. His target share has dropped 3 straight years. His touchdown percentage has dropped 2 straight years. He had no targets last week. Granted, they only passed the ball 10 times, but at this point, he's an extra offensive lineman. They want to run the ball, and he's helping them with that.
And then you got Jimmy Graham in here. Austin Hooper, now some of that was game script related. A lot of it was, later in the game. But, I mean, Jimmy Graham looks like he's outside of Devontae Adams, who you already mentioned has a ridiculously tough matchup. Jimmy Graham's the other guy that can catch touchdowns for that team. So what do you like about him?
Last year, his first year in Green Bay, he did not have his traditional red zone and end zone usage. Week 1, he saw 3 red zone targets, 2 of them in the end zone. If it's going to be anything like that, he's going to have his touchdown upside again. And considering his price has dropped below his peak, that's enough. That's going to be worth it.
And one other guy you wanted to kind of give a little warning on, he had some high hopes going into the season, but it's Jared Cook. What do you see in his game or in the Saints distribution that maybe doesn't – I mean, he's 47 – would you rather pay $4,700 for Jared Cook, who got 3 targets in a really high-scoring game, or would you rather pay $500 more for Evan Ingram, who got 14 targets in the last game? I mean, this is like a no-brainer.
Yeah, Jared, I mean, you said it earlier. The Saints are still Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and then we'll see what happens after that. But Cook had fewer targets than Traquan Smith, had fewer than Ted Ginn. I still think there's upside. I still think he'll have a few of those big games, but we have no idea when they're going to come. And I want somebody who's safer than him right now.
Yeah, you can mess around. Of course, you can play Mark Andrews. 8 for 8 receptions to targets. The clear passing tight end looked absolutely great out there, and I don't think Arizona is going to give him much resistance. And then, again, I think you can go Vernon Davis. I expect Washington to have to throw the ball quite a bit in this game against Dallas. He came through with a touchdown, 7 targets, probably a little bit more, 3,200. He was 2,700 last week, so when you get the under 3K player, it looks a lot better than 3,200 for your overall lineups, but I think you can go right back to him. And then the other one is Austin Hooper, who has a very clear role. He's just 3,100. He was 3,200 last week, goes 9 for 9 for 77 yards, and gets a $100 price decrease at tight end. So I don't really know what was going on with that, but he should have seen a bump up. He actually got the price down, just like Gronkinson. So I think Hooper, there's a lot of viable tight ends. I think this is like a resurgence. Are all these teams reading PFF and understanding that you can throw to the middle of the field and it's basically the best offensive play you can have?
I wrote my bold predictions column before the year, and one of the things was we're going to have a rebound from the tight end position. There are so many interesting guys, and some of them are going to fall flat. But I agree with you. There's so much weaponry there.
Yeah, all these guys are using that super ultra secretive PFF subscription that costs $5 million per team or whatever. I don't even know to read all that. But yeah, I think that's going to about do it for week 2. It was fun. We covered a lot of stuff. Always great articles on PFF. Daniel, I'm having fun doing these shows with you, dude. So I'm looking forward to a good season. Any final takes? Any strong things come through with you on the show you want to get out to the people?
No, I just take the things I get right and ignore the ones I get wrong.
Yeah, that's what we all want as fantasy analysts. All right, we're gonna get out of here on that, guys. Thanks to all you watching and all you guys listening on podcasts. We really appreciate it here. RotoGrinders, go check out PFF if you like fantasy articles or want to read Scott's stuff or Daniel's stuff or look at all the grades. You can get that relatively inexpensive. I think it's $39.99 for a full season. And one of the few things I actually use other than RotoGrinders to do a lot of my research for my own lineups. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Daniel for coming on with me. I'm Britt, and we out you.